Morning, all of you who are in Singapore, and hello to everyone else, wherever you may be. So tonight we have, for me it's night. This session will be the last in this series of 12 sessions on the text, the 7-point mind training. And so we won't have time to go through every part of the text, but I'll just do as much as I can. And then if you have a chance, you are interested, you can read more on your own, the rest of the text. So since last week, we started looking at the topic of ultimate bodhicitta, which is actually the wisdom realizing emptiness. It's a very difficult topic, and we really don't have time to go through it in detail. But I did talk a little bit about it last week, and I thought that tonight we can just do a little bit of meditation on this topic to start with. And it's also good to meditate a little bit at the beginning of the session to calm down, settle down, get our minds into a good state for what we are doing here. So I invite you to make yourselves comfortable. Sit in a position that is comfortable for you, but at the same time, it's good to sit with your back straight. Keeping the back straight helps the mind to be more clear, more focused, more alert. And one way to relax and bring our attention into the present moment is to take a few deep breaths. Breathe in slowly, as much as you can before it gets uncomfortable. Pause for a moment and then exhale slowly. Let your breath go out slowly. So breathe like that for 3 times and then just go back to your normal rate of breathing. So again, breathe in slowly, pause for a moment, and then exhale slowly. You can exhale through your mouth if you wish. And when you exhale, imagine if there is any tension in your body or in your mind, it goes out with your breath and disappears in space, just becomes non-existent. And now continue breathing in a normal, natural way without manipulating, controlling your breathing. Allow your body to breathe naturally. And just with your mind, your awareness, be aware of the breath as it's coming in, as it's going out. Try not to think about anything else. If thoughts do come up in your mind, just notice them. Don't get upset. It's normal that thoughts pop up in your mind. But then let them go. Put them aside without following them, getting caught up in them. Just keep your mind, your attention in the present moment, being aware of the breath coming in, going out. Bring your attention back to the breath anytime it wanders away. And now let's take a few more minutes to make sure we have a positive altruistic intention as our reason, our motivation for participating in this session. So bring into your mind or into your heart whatever feelings of compassion, of kindness, of wanting to benefit others you are able to feel. We all do at least sometimes feel the wish that we could make our lives beneficial for others, that we could help other people and help the world. So bring that thought, that feeling into your heart. And we're really fortunate that we had the chance to meet the Buddha's teachings, because they show us our potential, our Buddha nature. This is part of our mind. Our mind is basically clear and pure, and disturbing emotions like anger, attachment, selfishness, ignorance, and so on are not inherently part of our mind, permanently part of our mind. They are temporary, transitory. And it's possible for us to work on our mind and gradually reduce them and eventually free our minds completely from all these disturbing emotions. Now we can develop our positive qualities such as compassion and love, wisdom, faith, joyous effort, patience, and so on. We have these qualities within our minds, and they can be developed more and more and eventually perfected. So that's how our mind has the ability, the potential to transform into the enlightened mind, the same kind of mind that the Buddha achieved. So we can do that as well. Buddha showed the way, and we're really fortunate that we had the chance to encounter these teachings and to have interest in them and to want to study them more and practice them more. But it's important when we do learn about the Buddha's teachings and put them into practice, that we do so with the motivation of compassion, of altruism, wanting to benefit others. So see if you can make that your reason, your motivation for participating in this session, to learn about the path to enlightenment so that you can reach that state of enlightenment or Buddhahood for the benefit of all living beings. So let's do a little bit of meditation on something I spoke about last week. I started talking about ultimate bodhicitta, which is the wisdom understanding emptiness. Emptiness is the true nature, the actual way of existing of everything, all phenomena. That includes our own self, other people, other beings, and all the things in the world around us. And it also includes enlightenment, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So whatever there is, whatever exists, has emptiness as its real nature, its final mode of existence. But it's recommended that we start our investigation of emptiness with our own self, our own I. And the first step in the process is to try to get a sense of how we do see ourselves, how we do feel or think that we exist. So right now, we're all sitting either in a chair or on a cushion, quietly, eyes closed or partially open. So at this moment, we have a sense of I am sitting. I am meditating. So strictly speaking, it's our body that is sitting. We say I'm sitting because our body is in a particular posture. The back straight, our legs crossed, or on the floor if we're sitting on a chair. So when our body is in this kind of posture, we say, I am sitting. So just ask yourself, what is the I that is sitting? Is it something other than the body? Is there another thing besides the body that we can point to and say, that's the I that is sitting? You might think that the I is some part of the body, maybe the brain or the heart. Just check that idea. You feel that your I is your brain, or your I is your heart, or some other part of the body. And in a similar way, when we're meditating or thinking, like trying to solve a problem, trying to figure something out. So those kind of activities are mental activities. It's actually our mind that meditates, our mind that thinks, that analyzes, that tries to figure out problems. But again, we have a sense of an I that thinks, an I that meditates, an I that tries to solve a problem. So is the I something other than the mind, something different from the mind, that uses the mind, employs the mind to think, to meditate, to problem solve? Just explore that idea, that question. Okay, so we can now open our eyes and come out of meditation. So don't worry if you feel confused. When we start looking at this topic of emptiness and what is the I, what is the self, we can feel quite confused and maybe even sort of disoriented. But that's absolutely not a bad thing. It's a good kind of confusion, because most people probably just go through life doing things with their bodies. You know, when we're little kids, we play, we run, we walk, we eat. And then as we get older, we learn more and more things that we can do with our bodies. And also with our minds, we use our minds to learn and to think and analyze and lots of different things. So we engage in all these different activities, but probably most people never question, what is the I that is doing all these things? What is the I that works, walks, runs, eats, sleeps, and so on? What is the I that thinks, meditates, analyzes, solves problems, makes plans? So it's a question that most people never think about. And but it is an important question. According to Buddhism, it's a very, very important question to figure out, what am I? What is this thing I call I? So I'll talk more about this afterwards. But to start with, there were a couple of questions from last week that were sent to me. Poon King asked a few questions regarding some of the things that I said last week. So I'll answer those first, and then we'll go on looking at ultimate bodhicitta. So the first question is, regarding the cup that you were holding. I use this example of a cup. There is a cup when you are holding it. However, when you put the cup down and leave the room, the cup no longer exists. This likens to be the view of the mind-only school, where everything exists within one's mind. Am I correct? So the mind-only school, or Chittamatra school, is one school of Buddhist philosophy. It's also known as the Yogacara school. And they have an explanation that everything that we see, all the physical objects, you know, visual objects, sounds and smells and so on, so all the objects that we perceive, although they seem to exist out there, be external to our mind, that's actually an illusion. That's a wrong perception. Instead, what happens when we perceive an object, like the cup, I still have the same cup here. So there are lots of seeds or imprints on our mind left from past actions and past experiences that we had. And those seeds, one seed at a time, I guess, will ripen. And when the seed ripens, it causes the appearance of an object, like the cup, and the consciousness, the mind that perceives the cup. So one seed ripens and produces object and subject simultaneously. So that means the cup doesn't really exist outside of my mind, separate from my mind. It's an appearance that comes from my mind. And the mind that sees the cup also comes from my mind. So those two things arise simultaneously. from the seed in the mind. So they say that about everything we perceive, all the visual objects, sounds, and so on and so forth. They all exist in that way. So I'm not sure that the mind-only school would say that if everybody leaves the room, the cup is on the table, but everybody leaves the room, so there's nobody there to see the cup, then it goes out of existence. I'm not really sure that they would agree with that, because when I was studying the topic of tenets, the different schools of philosophy, my teacher, Khyentse Jampa Tekchok, spoke about tanka, like a religious painting. We have tankas of the Buddha and so on. And he said that an artist first paints a tanka, and then when 10 people look at it, it seems like we're all looking at the same tanka. We're all seeing the same tanka. But if we investigate, if we analyze, we find that actually each person sees a different tanka according to their own mind. You know, for some people it's very beautiful, others it's not beautiful. Some people find it attractive, some people may find it frightening, disturbing. Now, everyone will see the tanka in a different way. And this is because the tanka that we see is actually kind of projected by our own mind. Again, the seeds or imprints on our mind ripen and produce this appearance of the tanka. So each person has their own tanka in a way that is appearing to their mind. So that's the main point of the mind-only school. They say that each person has their own appearances of things, even though we may think we're looking at the same thing, but we each have our own appearance of that object. And this is due to the imprints on our mind. But that doesn't mean that when I see the tanka, that my mind has painted the tanka. I'm not a tanka painter. Otherwise, I'd be a really good artist. The tanka was still painted by an artist, probably a Tibetan artist in Nepal or India or whatever. So there was a tanka that was painted by that artist. But then when each person looks at that tanka, they have their own appearance of it. And the tanka painter himself or herself also has their own appearance of the object. Yeah. So I don't think that the mind-only school would say that if everybody walks out of the room, the tanka doesn't exist anymore. Somehow that doesn't seem right. For example, like now in Amitabha Buddhist Center, there's lots of tankas, lots of statues. There's probably nobody there. The center is closed. So there's no human being there looking at those tankas and statues. So does that mean they go out of existence? They're not there until somebody walks in the room and suddenly they're there? I don't think they go that far. I don't think that mind-only school says that. And they might also say that, well, even if there's no human being in the room, there are other beings who see those tankas and statues. The Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas, holy beings, devas. So human beings aren't the only beings that there are who can see things. So I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what the mind-only school would say about this. But I also wonder if this would be a question they're really concerned about. If they really worry about whether the cup stops existing when everybody leaves the room. Is that really important? Because another name for this school, the Yogacara school, is, another name for the mind-only school is Yogacara. And the meaning of Yogacara is practitioners of yoga. Yoga here meaning spiritual yoga, mental yoga. And the reason they use that name is because they're very intent, very dedicated to working on their mind and transforming their mind, overcoming the afflictive emotions, greed, hatred, ignorance, pride, jealousy, and so on. And this view that they have, that things don't exist externally, things are just kind of projected by our mind, is very helpful for overcoming the afflictions. Because if you think, let's say you see some beautiful object and you feel attracted to it and you feel attached to it and you have desire for it and you want to buy it and have it and own it and possess it and so on. But if you think, well, it's only appearing to me because of a seed on my mind that's ripening and projecting that appearance. It's not really out there in the way that I see it. So understanding that, meditating on that and understanding that really reduces the attachment that we have. And same with aversion, negative feelings like feeling angry, aversion, hatred, and so on for some person or some object. If we understand that the object we see is coming from a seed on our mind, it's not really out there in the way that it appears. That really helps to reduce our anger, our aversion. So I'm just not sure if they are so concerned about that question of, is the cup still there when we go to the room? That may not be so important for this work of training our mind, transforming our mind. And you also asked in your question how the middle way consequent school, the Madhyamika Prasangika school, how they understand the cup. And yes, I think they would say that the cup is still there when we leave the room. If everyone goes out of the room, the cup is still there, it doesn't go out of existence. Because they do acknowledge there are other minds besides ours who can perceive the cup. But that doesn't mean the cup is inherently existing. So the middle way consequent school, what they're really concerned about is how does the cup exist? What is its mode of existence? Does it exist inherently, independently, objectively, as it appears to, like something real, solid, objectively existing out there from its own side, not depending on anything else? So they say if we investigate and check if that's how the cup exists, then we will discover that it does not. And in fact, it's just labeled by the mind on top of a collection of parts like molecules, atoms, none of which is a cup. So this is going into the Prasangika view of emptiness. So they say the cup is empty, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It does exist. We're able to put water in it and it holds the water. The water doesn't go all over the floor. And then we can drink the water from the cup. So it does exist, it functions. It just doesn't exist in the way it normally appears to us. Something real and independent and objectively existing. Another question from Poon King was about this story I told about the man who put himself in the place of someone who was going to be executed in order to save this person's life. And the question is, isn't it the case that there are vows for practitioners that only when one is ready to give away one's body, meaning when they actually feel joy and bliss and no pain when giving their bodies? Yes, it is said that we shouldn't sacrifice our life, give up our life too quickly before we are really ready to. I think that's in that story. I think that this man, he was actually a Lama. He was probably a highly accomplished meditator and teacher. So it sounds like his mind was highly developed and he was able to transform that situation and not feel suffering as a result of it. But if one of us were to try to do that, then we may not be able to. We'd probably be very scared and maybe even screaming in pain. So yes, it is said that we do need to, even though there are these stories like that, and also the story of the Buddha in a past life when he was a bodhisattva and came across a hungry tigress mother tiger and her babies, and she was starving. And he felt so much compassion for her that he decided to offer his body. And but he was already a bodhisattva, quite highly accomplished, and uncontrived bodhicitta, altruism, compassion, love. So he was able to do that without any damage to his spiritual practice and so on. So they do say, yeah, we need to develop our minds further before we are able to do that kind of practice. But we can start with small things. For example, being bit by a mosquito or another insect, feeling kind of hot or cold, feeling some pain, headache, tummy ache, whatever. So with small discomforts, if we can use those in the path with the practice of mind training, Lo-jong, Tonglen, and so on, then gradually we can build up and do the practice with more and more extreme forms of difficulties and problems. So start small. Like Shantideva in his text, he says, in the beginning, give vegetables, give things like carrots and potatoes to people. So start your practice of giving, generosity like that. But then later, when you are able to see your own body as being like a vegetable, like, just organic matter, and you attached to it, and you're not identifying with it, and your cultivation of compassion and love is very, very, very strong, then you can give your body. But we're not required to make such gifts right from the beginning. It's only when our mind is highly developed. So again, last week we started looking at this topic of ultimate bodhicitta, which is the wisdom directly realizing emptiness. And it's very important to develop this wisdom, because it's the only thing that will eliminate the cause of suffering. According to Buddhism, the root cause, there's many, many causes of suffering and problems, but the root cause, the main cause, is ignorance, believing in things existing in a way that they actually don't exist. Like believing in a real, independently existing I, and then believing in other people and other beings as if they also exist in that way, independently existing, and also all the physical things in the world around us. So everything that appears to our mind seems as if it's existing in this false way, what's sometimes called inherent existence or intrinsic existence. I like to use the term independent existence. Kind of makes more sense to me, because independent existence means things appear as if they don't depend on anything else for their existence. They're standalone, they're autonomous, able to set themselves up all by themselves without needing anything else. So that's how things appear to us in a subtle way. It's not that our mind deliberately, consciously comes up with this idea, but it's just a kind of instinctive way that we see everything. Because according to Buddhism, we've had this way of seeing things in our mind, from beginningless time. Our mind has always been under the influence of this ignorance, this misconception of seeing things in that way. So we're born with it. As soon as we open our eyes and start perceiving things in this world, then everything appears that way, and we just go along with that appearance. We believe it. We believe things do exist that way. But Buddhism, or at least the Madhyamika Prasangika school, says they don't exist that way. Things don't exist that way. That's a false mode of existence. So we need to, and it's not enough just to hear that and say, oh, okay, I accept that. I believe that. That's true. That's not going to work. that will not eliminate this grasping, this perception of things and grasping at things as existing in this wrong way. So what we have to do is go through a process of investigation. We have to actually check, how do things appear to us? Like just a little while ago, we were doing a meditation and I was asking you just to check out your sense of self, your sense of I. How does it appear? What is the I? What do you think your I is? How do you think your I exists? So that's just a first little baby step in this process. Just getting a sense of our sense of I. As I say, even though we have this mistaken way of seeing things with regard to everything, every other person and everything in the world around us, but it's best to start with our own sense of self, partly because we live with ourselves 24 hours a day. And so the sense of I is always there. It's always with us from the time we wake up in the morning, and maybe even in our dreams, we still have a sense of an I in our dreams. And so it's very much present with us all the time. Another thing too is, if we have a false sense of I, a mistaken sense of our own I, me, then that becomes the basis for our other afflictions, our afflictive emotions. Because, you know, based on a sense of I, then we also have this feeling of I am important. In fact, I am the center of everything. I'm the center of the world, the center of the universe. Everything revolves around me. And the way we look out at the world, at other people and things and events and so on, is always from my perspective, according to what's good for me, what makes me happy, what makes me comfortable, what I like, what I want. Okay, so our sense of self is always there in our way of perceiving, judging, and reacting to other people and other things. So if our sense of I is faulty, you know, it's dysfunctional, we actually don't have a correct sense of I, it's distorted, then all of our other perceptions of things, our reactions to things, our decisions about things will also be faulty. So then that's how we get ourselves into trouble again and again and again, and create lots of problems for ourselves and for others. So this is a really important one to clear up, the sense of I. Who am I? What am I? How do I exist? And then once we get a better understanding of that, we can start looking at other objects as well, other people and other things, and check how they exist. So this is a difficult topic, but very, very important. And so my teachers say, any effort we make, any time and energy and effort we put into trying to understand emptiness, like listen to teachings about it, read books about it, discuss it with our Dharma friends, think about it, meditate on it, and so on. Even if we feel, I don't really understand this, it's really confusing, but just making that effort slowly, slowly, it starts to make more sense. Because I remember when I first started learning Buddhism, I found this topic it was really interesting, but at the same time, it was really difficult. And I just couldn't understand what they were talking about even. So it was only slowly, slowly over the years, reading more, hearing more, thinking more, starting to make sense, and now I'm at the point where I can even talk about it, although I still don't realize it, but much better than I used to. Okay, so again, in the process, it's recommended we start with our own sense of self, or I, and we need to get a sense of how our mind does see our I, the I, each one of us has an I, a self, a me, how it appears to exist in this mistaken way, which is inherently existing or independently existing, autonomous, objective. It's like a real thing. Yeah. And so it feels like there's a real I somewhere inside of us. It's kind of vague, probably. We don't have a clear sense of what it is or where it is, how it exists, but it just feels like it's there. And it's most clear and most vivid when we get emotional. Like if something goes wrong and we get upset, or somebody mistreats us, gets mad at us, blames us, criticizes us, and we get upset, we get angry, we feel hurt. So at that time, the sense of I is very strong, very vivid, feels really, really solid. Okay, it's an I. I mean, the feeling of anger or hurt or upset, that's part of our mind. That's a mental state. But underneath that feeling or behind that feeling, there seems to be this I who is upset, I who is angry, I who is hurt. So we have to try to catch a glimpse of that. Not easy, because as soon as we put our attention on it, it kind of slips away and disappears. It's very sneaky. But we keep working on that, and we start to get more and more a clear sense of this sense of an I, seemingly real and independent on its own. So they say actually yogis, meditators might spend years just working on this first point of getting a glimpse of the I. And they use the term object of negation, the seemingly real, independent I is the object of negation, meaning that's the thing we're trying to catch and then refute, reject, negate, realize that it doesn't exist. It's a little bit similar to, it's a funny example, but some of you might be parents, and you have small children, and sometimes it's bedtime, but the kids are afraid of going to sleep because they imagine there's, I don't know, we call it in America, a boogeyman, a monster, something scary, some kind of scary creature that's under the bed or in the closet. And they really believe that monster is there, and they don't want to go to sleep because they think the monster is going to come out and eat them. So let's say there is a child, or maybe it's you yourself, imagining there's something under the bed that's going to harm you when you go to sleep. So, I mean, sometimes our mind is like that. Our mind just makes up some story like that. And then it keeps thinking until it seems more and more real. And then we really can't go to sleep because we're so scared. So the thing to do is to turn on the light or get a really good, strong flashlight and go down under the bed and just shine the light everywhere under the bed, every possible place where this boogeyman might be, or the closet or whatever. You know, really check carefully. If there's a boogeyman in this room, I should be able to find him. So if you really check every possible place and you don't see any boogeyman, then you should be able to say to yourself, okay, there's no boogeyman. It was just an invention of my mind, a creation of my mind. It's not really there. Because my mind made it up, and I don't have to believe my mind. So shut up. So tell your mind to shut up and stop coming up with these silly fantasies, and then go to sleep. So it's a little bit similar, what we're this process of investigating our sense of self, our sense of I. Okay, we do have this sense of a real, inherently existing, independently existing I, and our mind tends to just buy into it, believe that it's really there, it really exists. But if that's true, if that kind of I really does exist, then we should be able to find it. So we look in all the possible places where it could be. And hopefully, if we do that investigation well, we won't be able to find it. It's not there. So then that's what it means to realize emptiness. You realize the emptiness of what used to appear so real, so solid, so irrefutable, undeniable, this real I. But then we realize, hey, it's not there. You can't find it. It doesn't really exist. So that's just roughly what it means to realize emptiness. So there's different kinds of reasons or reasonings to understand emptiness. It isn't enough just to sit down and say, oh, there's no I, and then meditate on that. That's not the way to realize emptiness. Instead, we have to use a reason, because there's deep in our mind, there is this innate, instinctive conception of an I, believing in an I, and we have to uproot that. We have to free our mind from that. And we can't do that just by concentrating on our breathing, just by making our mind blank, not thinking about anything. That's not going to make it go away. It might go away for a while, but then later, as soon as we find ourselves in a situation where somebody pushes our button, something happens that we don't like, somebody insults us, you know, the feeling of I will come up again. We get all upset and angry. So it's very, very deep in our mind, very instinctive. So we have to root it out. The way to do that is by using some reasoning. So it's said that the best reasoning to use is dependent arising. Dependent, oh, I forgot to bring that book. I was going to read a quotation from His Holiness. Actually, it's from Nagarjuna in a book called How to See Yourself as You Really Are. So actually, because we don't have much time to talk about this topic, I wanted to recommend some books. And so that's one of the books that I think is really good. It's called How to See Yourself as You Really Are. Long title. And it's teachings by the Dalai Lama on emptiness. And they were edited by Jeffrey Hopkins, Professor Jeffrey Hopkins. He did a really good job. He kind of made it relatively simple and kind of everyday language that we can relate to. And includes little meditations at the end of each chapter. So that's one of the best books to learn more about emptiness. And yeah, anyway, there was a couple of verses in there from Nagarjuna, the great Indian philosopher who was kind of the founder of the Madhyamika school that really focuses on emptiness. So yeah, he talks a lot about dependent arising. Dependent arising or dependent origination simply means that whatever exists in dependence on other things. Nothing is independent. Nothing is standalone. Nothing exists by itself. Totally separate, cut off from everything else. So contemplating, learning about this and thinking about this and trying to bring it into our daily life is really helpful. It's a way to get an understanding of emptiness. Ah, somebody just brought the book. Okay, so yeah, this is what the book looks like. I don't know if you can see it, but how to see yourself as you really are. If I can find that quotation. Yeah, here it is, page 50. He says, through reflecting on dependent arising, you will lose the belief that things exist in and of themselves. And here's a quotation from Nagarjuna. The apprehension of inherent existence is the cause of all unhealthy views. Afflictive emotions are not produced without this error. So in other words, believing in inherent existence is the basis of all other wrong views, and also afflictive emotions like greed and hatred. Therefore, when emptiness is thoroughly known, unhealthy views and afflictive emotions are thoroughly purified. Through what is emptiness known? It is known through seeing dependent arising. Buddha, the supreme knower of reality, said, "What is dependently produced is not inherently produced." So that's a quotation from a great master, great Indian master of the Nalanda tradition about the importance of dependent arising. And yes, Buddha did talk about it. And so it said that there are three ways that things exist dependently. And I'll just briefly talk about these. The first is that things depend on causes and conditions. So this is true for all impermanent things. And that includes our bodies, all the material things, the physical things in the world around us, your house, your apartment, all your furniture, all the things in your kitchen, all the food we eat, all the buildings around us, the cars, the roads, all the human-made things, but also the natural things, trees, plants, the earth itself, water, mountains. So all these things are impermanent phenomena. They change moment by moment, and they all arise from causes and conditions. That's a feature, characteristic of impermanent things, that they depend on causes and conditions. So that may seem kind of simple and obvious, but it is really helpful to think about. For example, our own bodies. Now, I think most of us, if not all of us, are adults. Our bodies are fully grown, fully developed. But did they always exist this way? So we've all seen babies. Some of you may have had babies. So we know that when a human being first comes into existence, they're very tiny. Very, very small. So our bodies were like that once, this tiny little baby. And even before that, a baby grows in the womb of a mother, and it starts off as a tiny little fertilized egg, probably so tiny we can't even see it with the naked eye. We can only see it under a microscope. So this body that we have, which seems so big and strong and solid, once existed like that, just a tiny microscopic egg, fertilized egg, zygote. And then that grew inside our mother's womb, nourished, and slowly the cells divided and started to take shape, with head and arms and legs and toes and fingers, nose, ears, all the organs inside and so on. Okay. So contemplating that gives you a different sense of a body. Doesn't seem so solid, so permanent, so real. And anything else that you might take, any other kind of physical phenomenon. It's just really helpful to think about how it came into existence in dependence on other things. Various causes and conditions coming together. And it's changing all the time. So that what that means is then that our body and those other phenomena do not exist on their own, do not exist independently, autonomously. If it hadn't been for those causes and conditions coming together, if our parents hadn't met, fallen in love, had sex, and one element from our father met one element from our mother, and this body came about, then we wouldn't be here. Our body wouldn't exist. or if there had been some faults in our mother's womb, such that, this body wouldn't have been able to grow. So many causes and conditions needed to come together for our body to exist. So contemplating that then, it's not independently, autonomously existing. So that's just one example of our body, but everything else that we look at, all these physical phenomena also depend on causes and conditions. So therefore they're not independent. So it may sound simple, but it's really good to contemplate that. It's actually quite profound. It really gives you a different sense of things. Things don't seem so solid and existing out there by themselves as they used to. The second way that things are dependent is on parts. So this is true for everything, all phenomena, not just impermanent things, but also permanent things. Everything has parts. So again, our body, it's easy to understand how our body is made up of parts. Walk into the doctor's office and usually they have on the wall some drawing of the human body showing, the different organs and the bones and the blood vessels and so on. And then even the big parts that we can see, like the organs, the bones and so on. If you look under a microscope, then they are made of smaller parts, like cells. And even the cells are made of parts. So scientists are able to break things down into smaller and smaller parts or particles with different names, molecules, atoms, quarks. I don't know, I haven't studied that, but yeah, they're finding smaller and smaller particles of matter that make up bigger things like our skin, our blood, our bones, and so on. And again, all the material things in the world, rocks and trees and walls and stone and computers and phones and all of these things can be broken down into tiny parts. So things are dependent on their parts, because without the parts, that object wouldn't be there. An object wouldn't exist. If all the parts were taken away, the object isn't there anymore. So again, that might seem kind of simple and obvious, but it's very profound when you contemplate it. Contemplate how things only exist because of the parts that make them up. And therefore, they don't exist independently, autonomously, by themselves, on their own. And then there's a third way that things exist, and that is they depend on, the third way things exist dependently, and that is they depend on the mind, our minds, conceptualizing and labeling them. So, for example, we call this body. So when we see a body, then our mind immediately thinks body. And body is just a name, just a label. Human beings, at least English-speaking beings, human beings, have for this collection of skin, blood, bones, and so forth. So we tend to think when we see an object, maybe let's take a car. I think a car might be a better example. Probably some of you have a car of your own, and if not, you ride in other cars, even taxis. I know a lot of people in Singapore use taxis. So there's a car there that you can get into and drive somewhere, go somewhere. So as soon as we see a car, our mind just automatically thinks car. And it seems like it has carness, this quality of carness there in that object that's made of, metal and having a certain shape, certain qualities, and so on. So our mind automatically, immediately thinks carness is coming from that object. But if that was true, then we should be able to find something we can point to as being the car. And there we can go back to the parts, the last way that things are dependent. Car is made up of many, many different parts. And if we look at those parts and ask ourselves, is this the car? Is this the car? Like one by one, go through the different parts. We won't be able to find any part of a car that we can point to and say, that's a car. There's doors and windows and wheels and seats and the engine and all parts of the engine and so on. But none of those parts is a car. So where's the car? It seems to be there, kind of a real thing from its own side. It's not found. It's just named, it's just labeled, it's just called car. So human minds, conceptual minds, come up with a name, a label, and we put it over there on top of that collection of things that are not a car. a whole mass of non-cars, a collection of non-cars, because each part is not a car, therefore it's a non-car. So a whole collection of non-cars, and then we call it car. This probably doesn't make much sense to you, but yeah, this third way that things are dependent is actually very difficult. One has to really do a lot of thinking, a lot of investigating to understand it. And some teachers even say that to understand how things are merely labeled or merely designated, merely imputed, we have to first understand emptiness. And then we can understand how things are just labeled and not existing from their own side. But it's still an interesting question to think about. And like I say, this book, if you do have a chance to get a hold of this book, it talks a lot more in there about these different ways of investigating things. So this is just a brief introduction to the idea of dependent origination or dependent arising, which basically just means whatever exists is dependent on other things. Nothing stands alone, nothing stands by itself. And even just using the first of the ways that things are dependent, how they're dependent on causes and conditions, and thinking about that, getting familiar with that already is very helpful. It really helps to soften our mind in a sense that things will not seem so solid, so real, so permanent as before. And when our mind gets more soft in the sense of things not seeming so solid, then our disturbing emotions, our afflictive emotions, will also be softer. They won't be so strong, so powerful. Yeah, so we probably still feel some anger coming up, some attachment coming up, but not as strong as before. Like a huge tornado, a huge hurricane, a huge tsunami taking over our mind. It'll seem more like just a little wave. So it does help. That's my experience. It really helps to cool down our disturbing emotions. Okay, so like I say, we don't have much time to look at this topic. I do recommend that you do try to look at it more, listen to teachings. For example, at Amitabha Buddhist Center, they have the basic program. So within that, there are teachings on emptiness. And there's some really good books as well, like this one, How to See Yourself as You Really Are. Another book that's really good is called Insight into Emptiness. Insight into Emptiness by Khyentse Jampa Tekchop. It's published by Wisdom. I think that's a really good book as well. And another one called Introduction to Emptiness by Guy Newland. I think that's also published by Wisdom. Introduction to Emptiness. So you can go online and find those books, and those are kind of introductory level books, which are good for beginners, but even beginners might find them difficult. It's just a difficult topic, but don't give up. Keep trying. So there's a few more lines in the text related to this ultimate bodhicitta, so I'll just go through them quickly. The next one says, examine the nature of unborn awareness. So this is talking about the emptiness of the mind. Awareness is another term for mind. So we need to understand that our I is empty of inherent existence. Also our body is empty of inherent existence, and all the material things in the world around us, all of these are empty of inherent existence. But also our mind. And the mind is somewhat more difficult because it isn't visible. We can't see our mind. It's non-physical, non-material. But we can know our mind through meditation, looking at our mind in meditation, getting to know our mind in meditation. So we also need to understand that our mind is empty of inherent existence. And that might be a little more tricky because in Buddhism we say mind is something that always existed. It's beginningless. It didn't have a beginning. It's always existed, and it just goes from life to life. And then it will continue existing more lives after this one. And eventually it will reach enlightenment. Of course, we have to create the causes for that. But if we follow the path, then our mind will become enlightened mind. And then it will continue existing. It will never go out of existence. It will never stop. So mind is something that always existed and always will exist. So it's kind of eternal, we could say, eternal. So then when people hear about that, they might think, whoa, doesn't that mean mind is inherently existing? Intrinsically existing? Independently existing? No, it's not. Because it's dependent. It exists dependently. So how is it dependent? Mind is a continuum, like a river or a stream, flowing, changing all the time. Each moment, each tiny fraction of time, there's a new mind or new minds arising, and they last only a moment and then they pass away. The next one arises and passes away, and the next one arises and passes away. So this is a continuous process, a continuous flow of different experiences, mind moments. It's not a solid, permanent thing, always the same, always there, but always changing. So each moment of mind that arises does so in dependence on the previous moment of mind, and it may also depend on other factors, such as when we see something. That object that we see is one of the conditions for that mind to arise, seeing it. We wouldn't be able to see an object if it wasn't there. So seeing an object depends on the object. The same, hearing a sound depends on the sound. And then later we think about, we have thoughts about what we saw and what we heard. So they too are dependent on those objects. So mind doesn't exist independently all on its own. It depends on the object that it sees, depends on its previous moments. And yeah, so it's not a, and then parts. Mind also has parts because of these moments that make up the stream, make up the flow. Those are the parts of the mind. And even within one, if we were to isolate one individual experience in the mind, one mind moment, that also is made up of parts. This is a subject we call Lorik. Some of you probably studied it, the mind and the mental factors. So each moment of mind has parts to it. There's a main mind and a number of mental factors. And also mind is merely labeled. We label mind onto this stream of individual momentary experiences. So anyway, mind is also something we have to look at and understand that it is empty of independent existence. The next line in the text says, the remedy itself is released in its own place. And there's different explanations of this line. The one that made most sense to me is in Geshe-Raptin's book, Advice from a Spiritual Friend. And he said it refers to emptiness itself. Emptiness itself is empty. Some people make this mistake. They get some understanding of emptiness, and then they think, okay, everything else is empty of inherent existence. Everything else doesn't exist inherently or objectively, but emptiness itself, emptiness, that must be inherently existing, independently existing. So that's a mistake, but it's a mistake even some great masters of the past made. So it's easy to fall into that one. So even emptiness doesn't exist on its own independently, inherently. It too is dependent. So how is emptiness dependent? Emptiness is a quality, we could say a quality of everything. Every single phenomena that exists, every single individual person, me, you, all of you, all the other 7+ billion human beings on the planet, all the other sentient beings in the universe, all the material things. So all of these things have emptiness as their real nature, their ultimate mode of existence. So emptiness is like a quality of each and every one of these things. So emptiness depends on that object which has emptiness as its ultimate nature. Like our body, like you can take our body. So my body is empty, empty of inherent existence. It has emptiness as its nature, its quality. So the emptiness of my body depends on my body. If my body didn't exist, then we couldn't talk about the emptiness of my body. The same with everything else. The emptiness of the cup depends on the cup. The emptiness of the computer depends on the computer. The emptiness of the Buddha depends on the Buddha. Yeah, so emptiness doesn't stand by itself. Independent, separate, all alone, and, not depending on anything else. So even emptiness is dependent, not independent. So they say we have to extend our understanding of emptiness even to emptiness itself. Because emptiness, the understanding of emptiness is the remedy, like this line says. That's the remedy to our suffering. That's the realization of emptiness is what will enable us to be free of all our suffering and the causes of suffering. So even that remedy, emptiness and the wisdom realizing emptiness, those two must be understood as empty. Otherwise, if we grasp at emptiness as inherently existing, we still haven't got it. We still haven't fully understood emptiness. We really have to see the absolutely everything, whatever exists, is empty of inherent existence. Then, next line says, place the essence of the path on the nature of the basis of all. So, what this means is, this is a kind of future situation. After learning about emptiness, thinking about it, meditating on it, getting a good understanding of it. It takes time. It may even take lifetimes. We may not be able to get a realization of emptiness in this lifetime, but at least we can start. We plant seeds now in this lifetime, and then in a future life we'll be able to understand it, to realize it. Then once a person does get an understanding of emptiness, then we need to focus our mind on that, meditate on it, and make our minds really, really familiar with it as much as we possibly can. And it's by meditating on emptiness, familiarizing with emptiness, that we are able to clear away the afflictive emotions, greed, hatred, ignorance, and so forth, the things that obscure our mind, stain our mind, make our mind imperfect and unenlightened. And then gradually our mind gets more and more pure, and eventually we'll reach the state of enlightenment. So it isn't enough just to have one understanding of emptiness, one experience of emptiness, and say, okay, that's it. I'm done with that. One needs to meditate on it again and again and again. Really, really soak the mind in it until all the afflictions are gone. The last line in this section says, in between meditation sessions, be a creator of illusions. So again, this is talking about someone who has gained the realization of emptiness. And there are times when they're sitting and meditating, and times when they're not, times when they get up and they go around and do other things. If it's a bodhisattva, then they need to help sentient beings, so they need to work, practice giving and ethics and patience and so on, and create merit. So during the in-between sessions of meditation, one should continue to remember emptiness, one's understanding of emptiness, to all the things that are seen, everything that is seen. One should, keep in mind that they don't exist as they appear. They will still appear as if they exist inherently, independently from their own side, but one needs to understand that's not how they really exist. So they are like illusions or like dreams. They appear to exist that way, but they don't really exist that way. So it's hard for us to understand that until we've really gained an understanding of emptiness. But what we can do at our level, at this point in time, is to at least have some doubt about the way we see things, instead of just, totally believing in what our mind says to us about the objects that we see, especially objects of our afflictive emotions. A person or an object that appears incredibly attractive, and we just go, full of desire, full of attachment. So we can remember, maybe the object doesn't really exist that way. Maybe my mind is fabricating, projecting, making the object more than it really is. So just to have a doubt, just a question. Do things exist in such a real way as they appear to me? The same with objects, people or objects that we might feel aversion for, really disgusted, angry, hateful towards. To just check, do I really see that person or object in a realistic way as they are? Maybe not. Maybe my mind is exaggerating, fantasizing, making things up, not seeing things realistically. So at least to have some doubt about our mind, our perception, our way of seeing things. That's a good start. And doing this, you know, it's not a full understanding of emptiness, a full realization of emptiness, but it does start to decrease our afflictive emotions, at least the strength of them. Like I said, instead of a tsunami wave, they may be a smaller wave. And that can help us avoid getting into trouble, creating problems for ourselves and others. So I'm going to stop there. We're almost finished with time. We'll have a few questions, but yeah, I had wanted to do a few more of the precepts of mind training, but yeah, we just ran out of time. So maybe there'll be another chance in the future to go back at this text. So I'll just read one last text from Geshe Chekawa, the author of the text. It's the final verse of his text. He says, "My manifold aspirations have given rise to humiliating criticism and suffering, but having received instructions for taming the misconception of self, even if I have to die, I have no regrets." So he experienced difficulties in his life, but he felt very fortunate that he was able to learn these teachings on mind training and was able to practice them and was successful in his practice. So I do hope that you have learned something beneficial from these talks and will be able to practice, even if you can't practice all of it, even just one thing that you learned that you can put into practice to make your mind more peaceful and happy and positive, beneficial for yourself and others. Okay, so a couple of questions.
Okay, those who have questions, you can raise your hand. We have no question from the participant today. On behalf of the members and participants, I'd like to thank Venerable Sangye Khadro for the past 3 months teachings. And okay, we have one from Guaching. Okay, Guaching, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, Venerable.
Hi, Guaching.
Yeah, it's about this thing about identifying the object of negation. So, in order to identify the, inherent existent I, do we need to actually be able to differentiate it from the actually existent I? If we do, sorry, can you hear me?
You said when we're trying to identify the object of negation, meaning the inherently existing I, do we have to be able to differentiate it from the conventionally existing I?
Yes. That's my question is that, because just now you mentioned that a few masters actually say that in order to be able to identify the merely existent I, one has to realize emptiness.
No, I was talking about the third. Oh, okay. Let me go back. So one thing, I didn't mention this before, but my understanding is it's actually not possible for us at this point in time to differentiate conventionally existing I and the inherently existing I, because in our mind, the two are completely one.
Yes.
Yeah. So whenever we think I or feel I, our whole sense of I is the conventionally existing I completely kind of covered by inherently existing I. So they're completely like, they just appear indifferentiable.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's possible. It's not possible for us to be able to differentiate that. And yeah, my understanding is it's only after we realize emptiness, after we have, cleared away the wrong conception of the inherently existing I, only then can we really understand how we exist conventionally, the conventionally existent I. That's what I've heard. There may be debate about that, but that's my understanding. And in fact, some teachers, I think His Holiness Ling Rinpoche said this, the object of negation is the inability to distinguish, to differentiate the inherently existing I and the conventionally existing I. So that itself could be expressed as or explained as the object to be negated. So no, we can't expect ourselves to be able to do that in the beginning. That's a later step.
So in that sense, then how to correctly identify the object of negation?
It is hard. And they say we just have to watch our experience as much as we can. But they also say it's important to do purification, because if our mind is really crazy with lots of delusions, lots of afflictive emotions, it's like, then not much chance of being able to recognize the object of negation. So they say that's why it's good to do purification practice and also accumulation of merit. And also in retreat, that I think that's the best opportunity. Now your mind becomes more calm, you're not running around so much, you're not doing internet and texting and all this kind of thing. So when you're in a retreat situation, you have more time to meditate, to observe your experience, and then there's a greater chance of being able to catch a glimpse of this sense of self or I. So, I mean, that shouldn't make us discouraged and think, oh, there's no way I can do this. It's impossible. But yeah, just slowly, like I said at the beginning, just kind of watch your sense of self, your sense of I, and just kind of get more familiar with how it does arise, how it does appear, especially at those times when there's emotions, either negative emotions, anger, or also, feeling happy, feeling excited, you're praised, something wonderful happens to you, and there's this big, strong feeling of I there. Just say, oh, what is that I? So just asking that kind of question, I think, is already helpful. It's not the full meaning of, investigation into emptiness, but at least it's helpful. It's like there's this quotation from Aryadeva that's often quoted, where he says something like, just having doubt about the way things exist already starts to, shake the foundations of samsara. You've probably heard that one. Yeah, so even just starting to check, starting to ask, do I exist the way I think I do? Do other things exist the way they seem to? Already that is like shaking up samsara.
Okay, we have a question from Faith. Faith, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Venerable.
Right.
Hi, I have a question. You're saying about emptiness. If one of the ways things doesn't exist dependently is if you take part of an object, it would not be that object anymore. But then I don't really understand that when, like, if let's just say, I don't know, I lose a finger, like it's still a hand. So I don't know, like I don't see how taking part of an object makes it less of the object. Or like if one of the tires is taken away, it's still a car, right?
Well, I mean, ideally, we do this kind of investigation after we've already gotten a glimpse of how we see things as if they're inherently existing and independently existing. So that's why they say that's really the first step. The first step is to catch a glimpse of the way things appear to us and how they seem to be existing on their own, independently, standalone, autonomous. So then we take that way of appearance of an object and then check that against the reality of an object. For example, the fact that the object came into existence from causes and conditions, and it's made up of parts, and it's just labeled that. So that's the kind of conventional sense of the object. So then we compare that with how the object appears to us. And then it becomes really clear that we are not seeing things realistically. We are seeing things in an exaggerated way.
Okay, I see.
Makes more sense.
Okay.
It's kind of a process. It's a long process.
Okay. And I wanted to ask something actually related to the previous class about like death and like you were saying something about if we can prepare ourselves for death, then we can have a good rebirth, right? But I'm just wondering, like, is it enough to feel ready for death, or do you have to feel like, do you need to feel like joy? You know, like how bodhisattvas these days, they have like joy or they're looking forward to it. Like, it's just ready for death, is that?
Well, I think that's quite a high achievement to actually look forward to death. You know, one I think I'm certainly not at that point. I think one needs to have done a lot of practice, a lot of training, a lot of work on the mind to get to that point where you feel, you know, I'm ready to die. I'm fine. I will be okay, and even feel some joy. So, you know, I think that's a high achievement, and I know I'm not there, but if I can at least feel confident that I know some practices that I can do as I am dying, things that will help me as I am getting closer to death. Hopefully it's not going to be totally sudden and unexpected, but if I have time to sort of prepare for it, then there are things I can do during those final days and months and so on to really get myself into a good state of mind and do purification and accumulation of merit, and yeah, just mentally prepared for death. I mean, ideally we should be mentally prepared for death all the time, because it does sometimes happen very suddenly, very quickly, out of the blue. So yeah, they just say it depends on how much practice that you have done and how trained your mind is, how prepared your mind is. So
Okay.
there's a little book that I wrote called what is it called? Preparing for Death and Helping the Dying. I know ABC had copies of it. You might be able to find a copy of that.
Okay. All right.
Are there copies at ABC, Chunho?
I'm not
Is
sure
ABC
whether is it out of print or we may have reprinted it. Yeah, I have to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I have actually you can get it online. There's a PDF, I think Pukasi put it online. So you can just go online and type in preparing for death and helping the dying and get it right away.
Okay.
So that's just a little booklet that contains some, you know, ideas and some practices that you can use to start preparing for death. And it also has a list of other books that give more information. There's a lot of books out there, a lot of material available.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, also getting late in US. I just like to make one last announcement. Venerable has actually very kindly agreed to accept Dana's offering. Center will be assisting the collection. So please, if you want to make Dana offerings to Venerable Sangye Khadro, use Pay Now and make it by end of the day. And Venerable actually wanted to help us by accepting this offering and donating to Abe. So maybe Venerable, you want to share your thoughts on that to everybody here?
Well, I certainly don't need to receive Dana, but if people wish to give it, I'm going to offer it to Sravasti Abbey, because here in Sravasti Abbey, there are at the moment 16, the number varies, but at the moment there are 16 members of the Sangha living here. And so, it's great merit if you make offerings to the Sangha, and everybody here is working very hard to practice the Dharma, to teach the Dharma, to share the Dharma with the world, and so on. So, yeah, that's where the donations would go if you do wish to, but it's totally non-obligatory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
So,
Venerable.
yeah, so it's been really wonderful. I feel like I've gained a lot from having this chance to go through this beautiful text and remind myself of it. And I hope it's been beneficial for you as well. And it's very nice to see you and hear your questions. And I wish you all the very best in your study and practice. I understand Geshe Chunyi will be starting to teach next month. Is that right?
Yes, you'll be starting to teach on the 10th of October, Saturday evening, Singapore time.
Good, good, wonderful.
Yeah. 37 practices of Bodhisattva.
Oh, wonderful. That's a wonderful, another text on training the mind. We need that. We really need that. It's so helpful in our world right now. So let's finish by making a dedication of all the merit we've created during all these weeks, all these teachings. So really feel confident we have created a great deal of merit, positive energy. And this is the cause of happiness and the cause of growth, development on the spiritual path. And so let's dedicate this merit that it will be beneficial for all living beings. We've all been our kind mothers and fathers. And now we have a chance to repay their kindness by creating merit and sharing it with them, wishing that they will be free of their suffering and the causes of suffering, and that they will achieve happiness and the causes of happiness. All different kinds of happiness, up to the highest happiness of enlightenment, full enlightenment, Buddhahood. So may this be the cause for all of us and all living beings to reach enlightenment as quickly as possible. Okay, thank you very much for organizing these talks, and
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
bye.
See you.